Good evening, dear guests, dear amis de l'université. Madame Lutsch, merci pour le soutien, la confiance. Dear Mr. Zuma, thank you for being here representing the Embassy of Austria. Dear all, very happy to see that you came so numerously tonight to Kirchberg. And so maybe the first question that you are asking is taste. Why taste? So at university we like acronyms and T, transforming through art, science and technology. And also STARTS was taken, so maybe Christl Baur will say something about that later, so the European Commission Prize. The idea is precisely to discuss how all this can work together, or how it can contribute to facing today's challenges. So you've also seen our poster outside, or the flyers, and I have to say, when our graphic designer came up with this very bold typo, I had this epiphany moment, and without asking, there was this beautiful hint to EAT. EAT, Experiments in Art and Technology, which was a non-profit organization established in the 60s in New York to develop collaborations between artists, engineers and scientists. EAT initiated and created groundbreaking performances and installations that incorporated new technology. They expanded the role of the artist in contemporary society. Do art and science have a transformative power? So that's also the question we asked tonight. Technology creates dreams and fear. How can and should technology be used in creative and scientific research? Or inversely, how does tech and industry learn from them? And in what ways can society be involved? University of Luxembourg is a very young university, research-oriented and promoting interdisciplinarity. To propose solutions to complex questions and concepts, teams need indeed to rely on diverse and complementary expertise and knowledge. So how do universities contribute to society? By scientific research, innovation, by education, knowledge sharing, and I'd like to add questioning. At the last graduation ceremony, our rector recommended to cultivate curiosity. I couldn't agree more. Curiosity to break new ground, to reinvent yourself, to look beyond the horizon of your discipline, language or culture, or maybe challenge your way of life. And we all need to face uncertainty. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, with this year's theme, A Spirit of Dialogue, the Arts and Culture program invited global leaders to engage with creativity, not as ornamentation, but as a vital framework for understanding our shared humanity. I quote, "The program demonstrated that the arts are among our most powerful tools for fostering empathy, sparking imagination and catalyzing meaningful action." End of quote. If artists offer creative approaches to tech, grounded in human values, can they realign technology with societal challenges? In today's world, we need to ask ourselves how to imagine and shape our world and its machines, now and in the future. Many top-ranking universities, companies and private foundations invest in art science programs. Some might think it's trendy. Recently, the British Council stated technology needs artists. There is a debate about STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics versus STEAM, which has significant implications for the future of education. You have guessed, I advocate for STEAM. The A adding a creative dimension that fosters innovation, soft skills and critical thinking. So for tonight, I hope that the taste presentations and discussion will give you appetite for more explorations and new ways of thinking and doing, and leave us with valuable insights and human connections. With this, I will hand over to Nathalie Kerschen, which I really would like to thank you also for the very valuable discussions and this excellent collaboration on this new project. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So, hello everyone. So my name is Nathalie Kerschen and I will walk you through tonight's debates. I'm a trained architect who works at the intersection of academic research and creative expression. So I'm very happy to welcome you all here tonight at the Weika building for this very first series of the Taste, for the kickoff of the Taste series. Oh, this wasn't planned. But, hello.
Yes, but it's closed.
Apparently one can't enter the door into the back. You see,
sorry.
like it's a kickoff, so it's learning by doing. We will improve for the second one. Yes, so again, I'm very happy to see so many of you here tonight. Before we go to the heart of the matter, let me thank Anouk Wies for the wonderful opportunity to co-develop this framework, or the framework of this new platform. I would also like to thank les Amis de l'Université, as well as the Fondation Lutschweidert. Oh. So, the idea behind today's talk on art, nature and technology stems from a simple yet urgent observation. Since the 2020s, generative AI, and by this I mean large language models, such as ChatGPT or image-generating systems like Midjourney, have undoubtedly changed the way we produce, use, and relate to information. Through just a few words, these prompt-based systems can give advice on travel or cooking, perform administrative tasks, assist us with our texts, fix bugs in the code, or generate visual content. They do this not by copying the large data sets they were trained on, but by creating alternate outputs, ones which resemble existing content, without, however, reproducing it one-to-one. Access to these tools and techniques has led to undeniable benefits, turning many of us into quasi-skilled translators, coders, and designers. However, the systems can fail. They can cause glitches, and the resulting hallucinations have real-world consequences. Not a day goes by without generative AI making headlines. Articles range from questions about safety in traffic, to fears about job losses, to data protection, to misinformation, as well as to the integrity of our elections. Concerns which touch upon the very fabric of our democratic societies. The material infrastructure behind these technologies also raise important questions from a geopolitical and an ecological viewpoint. For example, consider the important amounts of water, energy, and rare earths needed for these large-scale factories to operate. Against this backdrop, how can we meaningfully engage with these tools and techniques? Knowing that with every click we make, our actions contribute to the societal, political, and ecological challenges we face on a global scale. Against the dominant tech platforms that own both the data and the material infrastructure to train these powerful agents, how can we resist the feeling of powerlessness? Finally, how can we critically engage with these tools and techniques, working with and against them to shape more fair, inclusive, and sustainable societies? In the field that brings us tonight together, a growing number of funding programs at the intersection of art, science, and technology offer guidance on how to imagine technologies that not only serve humans, but also other living beings, if not the biosphere itself. One of these initiatives is the European Commission STARTS program, of which we will hear more tonight, and which is coordinated by Ars Electronica. This funding instrument brings together artists, scientists, and engineers to address so-called real-world problems, designed to critically mediate the transition between the private sector and the wider public. STARTS, and that's interesting, positions the arts as the driver in this endeavor. Interdisciplinary collaborations which underpin programs such as STARTS aren't new. Neither is artificial intelligence a novel phenomenon. As we will see tonight, the field itself emerged in the 1950s from interdisciplinary efforts led by mathematicians, neuroscientists, engineers, and computer scientists to develop machines capable of simulating aspects of human intelligence using computation. Let me stress that intelligence here refers to a specific set of cognitive tasks such as problem solving, decision taking, and logical reasoning. And it didn't take long until these, what the theoretical founder of AI, one of them, Herbert A. Simon, called artificial systems, that is the human-made or the systems by design, caught artists' interest. For those of you who had the chance to visit Mudam's exhibition Radical Software last year, you may recall how it revealed the early entanglements between female computer artists and artists working with computation, university laboratories, and research facilities. Unlike today, in the 1960s, access to the large-scale machines remained limited, making such collaborations both rare and significant. Similar projects between computer scientists, engineers, and designers took place at the MIT's Architecture Machine Group. The group, which was founded in 1967, experimented with computational tools and techniques to advance so-called ideas about participatory design. Manipulating robots, sensors, and effectors within microworlds, they also experimented with so-called human-machine dialogues. Their interface, the Urban 5, very simple in a way, but conceptually it resembles platforms like ChatGPT, enabled users with no experience back then in computer-aided design to draw plans using natural language, that is words, instead of code. The machine in return was meant to learn from users' input to customize design solutions. I'll end this introduction with a brief note, with a brief historical note. In 1985, Nicolas Negroponte, one of the founders of the Architecture Machine Group, went on to create the Media Lab at the MIT, a so-called sandbox where engineers, designers, artists, and scientists mingle to technologically advance new designs. This was shortly after Ars Electronica was founded in 1979. Although their approaches differ, both institutions continue promoting collaborative projects at the intersections of art, science, and technology to address societal problems. So do various other labs, artists, and researchers, of which we'll get a taste tonight. Before I start, just a few words on the organization of tonight. So the speakers will present their work for 15 minutes, and then we will move on to a shared discussion, which is also open to the audience. So let me welcome our guests in the order of presentation. Our first speaker is Christl Baur, who is the head of Ars Electronica Festival and also interdisciplinary researcher who works at the intersection of art, science, and society. She has curated and co-produced numerous exhibitions and performances, and her expertise spans video art, media art, computer art, biotechnology, and interactive art. Christl also teaches at the University of Applied Sciences, Upper Austria. Next, we are joined by Professor Gerben Zaagsma from the University of Luxembourg. He teaches at the Center of Contemporary and Digital History. He has a background in modern Jewish and Yiddish history, and his current research focuses on the history of digital history, as well as the politics and the ethics of digital cultural heritage, seen from a global perspective. And he's currently working on a book on that topic. Finally, we will conclude with Nonhuman Nonsense Collective, represented by Filip Stanislavski. Filip is one of the 3 members of this research collective, which is art-driven and works also at the intersection of art and design. Their work engages animals, ecology, and technology to explore ethical layers of our relationship with the non-human world. By using nonsense as an antidote to common sense, they create paradoxical situations, as we will see, and borrow from the use and the misuse of logic and sciences to challenge these entrenched worldviews. So let me start with Christl. Let us start with Christl.
All right. It's a huge honor to be here and to share a bit about not only my work, but the work of an incredible team that is part of Ars Electronica. Ars Electronica is an institution based in Austria in a quite small city, an industrial city called Linz, and as we've heard already was founded 47 years ago. Our core motto ever since, so this was already the founding principle of Ars Electronica, was art with technology for society. So this triangle, as you can imagine, it is basis of all of the programs that we do, no matter in which direction, whether exhibitions, whether industry research or any kind. The focus shifts, but they're always part of it. I'd like to take you back actually to the very first festival.
18. September 1979.
I think most of you understand German.
Gast landet in Linz mit dem Auftrag, die erste Ars Electronica zu eröffnen. Staatstagend wird S+T+, der erste elektronisch gesteuerte Roboter vom damaligen Linzer Bürgermeister Franz Hillinger, begrüßt.
Willkommen in Wien, der S+T+.
Well, this spectacle of the first festival already started with a robot. So the idea already, the question was, what kind of interactions do we and humans as well as technological system have? And it was one of the reasons why Ars Electronica, at least in my opinion, stayed relevant, was because from the very beginning it started to combine thematic advancements, topics like art, technology and society, but always bringing together the wide audience. So not only for an expert group that clearly came every year to Linz, but also for the citizens of the city as well as of the region. Here you get an overview of the different topics of the festival since its beginning. And as you see, many of those ones we could easily do again, like in 1998, Infowar, or even life sciences in the year after. But we saw that Ars Electronica always tried to be at the forefront when it came to the different topics, which is why we always decide our current festival topic only actually in the beginning of the same year to make sure that we are on point for that particular year. And I can maybe say a bit more later. This year's festival, however, looks very different to the very first one. That was the festival in 2025 and a very large location within the city center called Post City. And we have, in the meantime, developed a wide array of different kinds of audiences, placing us as a platform in the center of society. That means we really welcome again artists, scientists, engineers from all around the world, usually, or at least last year, from 83 different countries, while at the same time making sure that around 50% of our audiences come really from the region. And that puts us in a quite challenging situation because, of course, when we talk about technology, the gap, the knowledge gap is very different. Also, the interest when it comes to discussion. So how do we stay relevant in terms of cutting-edge research and discussions, while at the same time making sure that we are not responsible for widening the gap, but rather the opposite, of creating knowledge within the local communities as well. So we work in a lot of different mediation situations to make sure that we address different audiences. And as you see, there are a lot of venues across the city, churches as well as bunkers, formats from exhibition to performance to conferences, workshops, networking events, and so on. So this is just to give you a little bit of an appetite of what the festival looks like, and at the same time an invitation to join this year in September. And with that, just a couple of figures from last year. The festival is always 5 days. We have usually more than 15 festival locations, 122,000 visits within those 5 days, more than 1,000 active, involved artists and participants from 83 countries. Of course, it's not me curating all of this, but fantastic colleagues. In last year, it was 51 individuals. And we have several hundreds of exhibited projects and events. Ars Electronica is not just a festival. We build a whole ecosystem around that, and that caters different needs of what we represent. So on the one side, we have an award, the Oscar of Media Arts, that we host annually, where we look for these exciting projects coming from artists from around the world. It's called the Prix Ars Electronica. The Ars Electronica Center, which is our year-round location within the city of Linz. It's not a museum, it's a mixture between an art and a science center, where the focus is on education for the local communities. So not like the international platform of the festival, but really a place where a lot of school classes come, a lot of universities on a regular basis to do workshops and to learn about the consequences and the effect that the technologies have on their daily lives. The Future Lab is our in-house research and development studio. They work, for example, with industry partners. And then Export, for example, brings our activities to places all around the world, whether in exhibition, workshops, conferences, or other different programs. A methodology that is at the background of all of these activities, it's called art thinking. Many of you might be familiar with what we call design thinking, and it's not, it's an addition to that. So as you see, I mean, you all are familiar with design thinking. It's quite product and service oriented, of course, very creative, but it looks for a solution. Art thinking, on the other side, does not look for a solution. Here, the idea is that in all groups where interdisciplinary people come together to think, to talk, to work together, art should be present. And by art, I don't mean design. That is still different. Artists should be part of these groups. Art thinking brings the different perspective of artists into the boat, so to speak, because we believe that science, for very good reason, needs to sometimes dig their tunnels deep into their research in order to make sure that they're advancing their own research focus. While the artists, they can take the liberty, they can take the freedom to look into other perspectives. And while doing that, making sure that they look at the relevance of society within these processes. So they are the ones that can bring in different kinds of questions. So not solutions, but new questions. And that's what we call creative questions. Sometimes when we ask a new question, the research will go into a completely different direction. And that is the goal, and that is why we bring in artists in all of our decision makings in order to make sure that we're not missing the actual point of what we're looking for. And I mentioned the Future Lab, this research and development studio. So, of course, engineers, but also artists are working there in this lab. STARTS has been a topic before. Science, technology with the arts and the arts. This is a program that the European Commission initiated 10 years ago. And the idea was to bring closer arts, technology, but especially with industry. So how can artists have an effect on industry? How can they become a valuable part in the development? And again, it's not the idea to create new solutions for the industry. They're good at this themselves. But the idea is to bring in new questions, to bring in new perspectives, and therefore to raise new ideas. I mean, we often mention that in the context of innovation. So what is innovation, right? Is it not a change in perspective in the end? And how can that be initiated if not by a new perspective that someone brings in, a new question that someone asks? And within the STARTS program, Electronica hands out 2 main awards. And the focus of these awards, you already see the purpose behind them. So the one grand prize is for artistic innovation. So artistic projects that bring new perspectives to potential industry topics at any kind. And the other grand prize is not awarding a project itself, but it's actually awarding innovative collaborations. So different partners coming together in unusual ways, whatever that is and whatever they do together. The collaboration is what gets awarded. And I will share now a couple of projects that come out of this STARTS prize. One is by the German artist Simon Becker, Google Map Hacks. So to show you, give you an idea of what subversive powers art can also have. You all know Google Maps, who has not used it today? What he did in Berlin is actually he walked over a bridge for 2 hours. He was pulling this red little cart that you see in the video. In the cart there are 99 cell phones. On all cell phones the GPS is turned on. So within half an hour, suddenly on Google Maps you see the street turning orange and then after a while red, which of course led to Google Maps redirecting the traffic. So for the people living in that area, in this quarter, it created 2 hours of silence, which was obviously very nice. The purpose of that project was to show how entangled our digital and our physical realities are already, and how much we depend on them. Not to criticize, but to show the power of human subversion to also again hack those systems in return. We don't only need to depend on them, we can also hack them at the same time. And that's what he did in a very simple and easy way. We spoke about non-human agents before. So the artist Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg from the UK created a project called Pollinator's Pathmaker. This is a project not for humans. It's an AI system that she custom trained together with different data scientists, but especially also different biologists and garden experts. And the goal of the web interface, you actually can find it online, is to create and design a garden based on the physical garden that you might have at home, on the size, on whether it's shady or not, on whether the earth is more acid or not, and then create a plan for planting different plants according to the needs of pollinators and not humans. So you'll find not roses in there, but you actually find flowers that throughout the season, from spring until late fall, have always food for pollinators in the end. And then you can print it out and you get a whole plan of how you can really plant your garden. And that is what she does. It's not the website that is the artwork, it's the physically implemented garden that you can find around the world based on this website and the knowledge. So also a question of how do we use our AI systems, right? Do we just use them in order to extract data, create large language models? Yeah, sure, why not? But also can we think about usage like that not only benefit humans, but that have an alternative benefit for others in our ecosystem. Another example is the work WeFrame by Adam Harvey. WeFrame stands for Visual Forensics and Metadata Extraction. That project started 10 years ago during the Syrian war. And Adam was actually working together with the Syrian archive. The whole purpose was to understand what kind of missiles are dropped on Syrian civilians. And because a lot of these missiles are not in any databases, nor do we have any training data of them, Adam designed himself 3D models of different ones of these missiles and trained his own algorithm with that. So based on this new training set that he created, he was now able to put a lot of the YouTube videos or images that were produced by the citizens of Syria in the war through that database. And based on that, the database was able to say, oh, that missile that was thrown on the school over there or on the hospital, that actually came from these or that agents. And so what is the relevance of art for society? I think these questions become quite clear when we look at these projects. And because we are in a time of rapid militarization, I think it's important to look at that project, the AI War Cloud Database by Sarah Siston. That's this year's winner of the S+T+Arts Award. And she is actually creating a whole database around the civilian usage of AI systems and at the same time the connections of these exact same systems with military usage. So as an example, the Roombot, the automated cleaning robot that many of you might have at home. That data that maps your floors and your houses at the same time goes into training data systems that help military systems understand different terrains, for example, in war zones. Or the camera that you have in front of your entrance door that scans the faces of the visitors, or even the camera of your phone that scans your face, is at the same time training, for example, other facial recognition systems that, for example, determine which people should be on kill lists or not. And we know how faulty those systems are. So it is, in the end, our responsibility not to change that system at first, but to make sure also of how do we use which systems and how do we apply them in our own lives. Yes, ideally we can change those systems in the long run, but that will not be up to us individuals. We need other power for that. And I will come now to a closing. For us, one of the answers is collaboration. We need collaborations. This is just an example of collaborators, partners of Ars Electronica within Europe. And to finalize my talk, it is science that creates knowledge, but at the same time, art creates meaning. And we need strong collaborations between disciplines here in order to make sure that technology is culture. That has always been the case, but that also culture gets the chance to shape technology on the other side. And with that, thank you very much.
Many thanks to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this first taste event on art, science and technology. What I'm going to do in the coming 15 minutes, I would like to take you on a short trip into the realm of science, scholarship and technology. And more specifically, I would like to take you on, I would like to talk about technology and the role it plays and has played for many decades in my own discipline, which is the discipline of history. Why? It hardly has to be said anymore, but a new technology has arrived in recent years that is promising to radically change how we do history, how we do science, history included. That technology is, of course, AI. But such promises about what technology can do for us are actually hardly new. So tonight what I would like to do is frame the so-called new methods, tools and techniques such as generative AI within a broader historical context of the use of computational tools in science and especially historical research. Now, if you would ask ChatGPT to create an image of historical research and historians or historical research in the age of AI, then these images are the result. As you can see, the technology might be quite new, but the output looks rather old. No matter how modern we might be, historical research is best performed by candlelight, by bearded historians in tweed jackets, dusting off their sources and reading them using a magnifying glass. Note that even if we use a computer, we still have the magnifying glass next to us. This is a very, very important element. On the right, this is actually interesting, on the left is ChatGPT. On the right is the same question asked to Claude. Claude clearly gets it a little bit more right. Talks about data and even talks about historians having an AI assistant. The difference between the two chatbots is of course also very important. That's also what we teach our students. The tool really decides the results that you get. So in terms of digital literacy, that's also an important point. The question is, of course, is AI really the new assistant for historians, as Claude is suggesting? And perhaps more importantly, is this technological promise, this vision of transformation, really so new? Now, the German newspaper Die Welt, which you see on the left, definitely seems to think that this is very transformative. Apparently in 2027, we historians are going to be redundant. So I better enjoy this year 2026. It might all be over soon. But actually we've seen this idea of a radical transformation that might make us historians redundant before. On the right you see an article from the BBC News more than 10 years ago that also asked if computers are going to replace historians. So it's all actually not so new. And the question then of course is also how can we look at the current rise of AI in relation to history in a long-term context. So let's first go back for a very brief moment to the beginnings of artificial intelligence. I'm not going to walk you through all of that, but as Nathalie already indicated, AI is not new, but emerged in the 1950s and was an integral part of the broader development of digital electronic computing. And in fact, the timeline is rather complex. It has many actors. It has a lot of realms of application over the decades. Logical reasoning, machine translation, neural networks, computer vision, more recently machine learning. So this is quite a long-term development, and as an aside, even experiments with chatbots are not quite as new as often thought. You see on the slide a screen from the ELIZA program created by Joseph Weizenbaum, which was a sort of chat program that simulated feedback based on human inputs, and that was created in the 1960s. And even then, some people, even if they knew they were chatting with a machine and the machine was not really understanding their input, people sort of started attributing certain emotions to that chat program. So, as I already mentioned, AI was an integral part of the history of computing, which was rapidly developing in the 1940s and the 1950s. And at that time, scientists also started to experiment with computing and what it could do for their research. And from the late 1950s onwards, universities began to invest in mainframe computers, the kind of computers that fill an entire room. Your own smartphone is, of course, thousands times more powerful than those machines back then. But what you see is that computing slowly becomes a part of the sciences and later also the humanities. But computers were not the first technology to have an influence on scholarship. Before digital computers, scholars already worked with mechanical aids and analog computers. And a very nice example of that in the humanities is this. The work of Roberto Busa from 1949 onwards. Some people might have heard of Roberto Busa. He was a Jesuit priest who, as legend has it, in 1949 walked into the office of IBM director Watson to propose a joint project, and namely to create a concordance, a lemmatized concordance of the works of the medieval theologian Thomas of Aquinas. And that project actually lasted 3 decades. And in the course of it, he used a whole range of technologies from mechanical tabulators to analog to digital electronics computers. And because that project was so big and one of the first big projects in the humanities, Busa is often seen as the founding father of what we now call digital humanities. But it's important to realize that Busa was actually not alone. We need to beware the myth. Busa's work did not develop in a void. And in fact, others in the 1940s and the 50s in the humanities were also trying out these new technologies, especially for data processing purposes. So you see a whole move in the 40s and the 50s of humanities scholars trying to figure out what they can do for their work with those new technologies. Actually, you see on the slide a small example of a folklorist from the United States named Bernard Bronson, who was trying to study folk song, trying to compare folk song by using these same punch cards that Busa was also using. So let's have a look what actually happened in historical research over the decades, if not the last 1.5 century. If we look at that human-machine encounter in historical research, we can see that technology has actually always played a role in how we produce historical knowledge. And the timeline that you see here visualizes that in a very, very simplistic way by distinguishing a number of basic phases. And the basic idea here is that in every phase you see a new or perhaps an existing technology that is adopted by new generations of historians who then try to integrate that in their research. And that's how things sort of move forward. So let me very, very briefly walk you through that to give you an impression. It all starts with the introduction of photography in archives and libraries in the late 19th century that radically start reshaping how historians can access and gather their materials. And in fact, already in 1906, a German Byzantine scholar named Karl Krumbacher writes a book about photography and the humanities, which was garnering quite a lot of international attention. And then later you see that other reproduction and preservation technologies, such as the photostat, an early photocopying technique, or the microfilm that is of course familiar to most of you here, is becoming introduced. And all of that means that historical research is no longer place-bound. You don't have to go to the archive or the library anymore, but you can start ordering photocopies. So a sort of early precursor in that sense of what digitization of archives also does. A little bit later, in the 30s and 40s, a small group of historians is pioneering the use of machine aids for historical data processing. Again, they use these punched cards, which allows them to start processing big amounts of quantitative historical data, much bigger than they could actually previously have done by hand. And then by the early 1960s, we see that a new generation of historians is discovering the potential of digital electronic computing. And I mentioned already, universities in the 1950s start buying these big mainframe computers, and that means that you now see a whole group of historians in Western Europe, in the United States, in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, who start experimenting with these big new digital electronic computers. And those historians also start creating their own networks. They start meeting at conferences. 50 years ago, the first big international history and the computer conference took place. They start writing manuals that you see on the right, the historian and the computer, to teach historians what they could do with that machine. So this is really the phase where historical computing is taking off. And then again, that changes, of course, in the late 1970s and especially in 1980s, when personal computers arrive on the scene and arrive on the historian's desk. And many more computers are now, many more historians are now starting to use computers as a tool in their research. And that actually leads to a special association of history and computing, which was created in the late 1980s. At its high point in the mid to late 1990s, the association had something like 10 or 15 national branches that all organized their own conferences. The association organized an international conference every year. There were book series, there were journals. There was really a lot of output, interestingly mostly forgotten today, but there was a huge momentum to work with computing. And of course, we also see the arrival on the scene of the internet and the World Wide Web. So history also starts moving online. A very early famous example is the Valley of the Shadow, which was a website, a sort of early digital archive of two communities in the American Civil War. Actually still exists online in its original version. And then around the turn of the 20th century, around the 2000s, we see another big technological shift, namely the move from dial-up to broadband internet connections. I don't know how many people in this room remember dial-up internet with a modem. I don't think I will ever forget the sound of mine. And there are even people nowadays who put the sound of those modems on YouTube. So whoever gets nostalgic can look that up. But that changes everything, because internet connections become much faster and it becomes much easier to load a lot of data on websites. So what you see then is that archives and libraries now have the possibility to start putting their mass digitization projects online, and users can now access them online. So suddenly historians start working with many more digital archives and libraries. Start using those, start figuring out what they can do with them, and also start developing new forms of historical storytelling online. Think of blogs, think of Wikipedia, etc., etc. Think of all kinds of online exhibitions. So all this sort of heralds the area that we currently call digital history. And to explore a little bit what actually all of that has meant for the development of historical research, we have in the past 2 years organized 2 conferences, one in Paris in 2024, and actually only a few days ago we had a 2-day workshop here in Belval to discuss the history of digital history, particularly in the Cold War context of the 60s and 70s. And why is that important? Because, as I mentioned already, a lot of this is actually forgotten. A lot of this much longer story of technology and historical research. But of course, if we want to move the field forward, then we need to start building on this accumulated knowledge and expertise of our predecessors. That brings me to AI. Is AI a new phase? Yes, it looks like it's a new phase. Where it will go is not yet clear, but many parts of our workflow are and will be affected. One very, very important example is the use of AI-powered handwriting recognition, as it's described here, to increase access to archives. So think about handwritten documents in archives that can be automatically transcribed by new tools, and that means that you suddenly can start searching through all those materials, and that offers possibilities for historical research and analysis that were not there before. But of course there's also another side of it, that is how history is consumed in the age of AI. It creates actually massive new challenges for how history is consumed by the wider public. Now, of course, yeah, I'm almost at the end. Mediations of history are plenty and are not new. I talked about blogs, I talked about Wikipedia, we have YouTube. History is on social media, it's also in games. We know all that, but AI greatly accelerates the creation and the distribution of fact-free, of alternative, of revisionist histories by state as well as individual actors. You see an example of DeepSeek on the left. If you ask DeepSeek, the Chinese model, what it knows about the events on Tiananmen Square in 1989 in China, then it will not tell you what is going on there, because it's not allowed to do so. And you can endlessly keep on asking and trying to push, and it will sort of more and more then confess that it really is not supposed to talk about that. You also now have the phenomenon, you see that on your right, of people trying to create fake Holocaust images and sell those. There is tons of fake images, videos of supposed historical events that haven't even happened online. So there's a lot going on in that sense that we as historians need to be mindful of. So just to summarize, I hope that I've given you some idea, if only very, very superficial and sketchy, of how technology has always shaped and framed and expanded or perhaps constrained the production of historical knowledge. And I think it is within that context that we need to see the rise of AI and its use in historical research. How it's going to affect historical research, we are just in a period where everyone is experimenting, so it's really difficult to say where that's going to go. But I think perhaps most important, there is this question of what kind of histories will people consume in the age of AI. Historians are only beginning to understand that, and this might really be the most difficult challenge for us to confront in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, thanks for the 2 wonderful presentations before and for inviting me. I'm Philips and I'm from a collective called Nonhuman Nonsense. And we are actually 3 people in the collective as a core group. There's Linnea, who is based in Stockholm in Sweden, Leo, who is in India, in Dharamsala, and me, who is based in Amsterdam. And as already Nathalie mentioned, a little bit about our collective. The name Nonhuman Nonsense is because our projects engage with the non-human, so ecology, technology, animals, plants, and so on, and things between and beyond these categories. And we see nonsense as a common sense, so as an antidote to common sense, to embrace paradoxes. And we do that by creating contradictory scenarios and propositions where we kind of borrow logics from different fields, such as science or computing or law. And we're also called Nonhuman Nonsense because for us, the separation between the human and the non-human, it's nonsense. It's just categorization, just a name. And To give you an impression a little bit about what sort of things we are creating, I will just go quickly through a few projects. So this is a picture from the Pink Chicken project, where we propose to color all chickens in the world pink by using a gene drive technology to reclaim the rock stratum of the Anthropocene. In Mud and Flood, The Return of Nealenia, we resurrect the forgotten sea goddess from Zeeland in Netherlands. In Planetary Personhood is a campaign, interplanetary campaign, where we propose legal personhood status to the planet Mars and all its inhabitants, so the stones. And Haunted Waters is a bar filled with contaminated waters from around the world. But today I will present the Council of Forest, which is a new project, a work in progress, where we explore the use of AI, large language models, for creating discussions on complex topics. So it's a space where we give voice to the beings of the forest to discuss the impact of human activities such as forestry, tourism, and the green transition. And we created this project in partnership with the Vindelälven Juhtahakke Biosphere Reserve, which is in the north of Sweden, in Sápmi. And so biosphere reserves are kind of territories, UNESCO designated territories that exist all around the world. And they're created to kind of explore ways of how to balance nature protection with human use. And this specific biosphere reserve has the name Vindelälven Juhtahakke because of the river Vindel. It goes from the mountain all the way to the coast. And the Juhtahakke is a Ume Sami name, which means migration route or moving path in Ume Sami. So because it was used and it's continuing to be used as a route for reindeer husbandry. And this area has a lot of tension in it. So historically the Sami were colonized and their needs would be overlooked. And also today the reindeer herding communities and also local ecosystems are sort of put as a second priority because of the green transition. So there's a kind of a funny, or not funny, it's kind of sad paradox of trying to address the crisis of the global climate by exploiting local nature, so extracting minerals or building windmill farms or hydropower. And the Council of Forest is an interactive artwork, and it exists, or it lives on a website. And there the forest speaks for itself through these AI large language models. It's a kind of a personification of the biosphere reserve. And there are trees, fungi, rivers, animals, and others that come together to discuss their shared fate of the life in the forest. And each meeting is generated live, so it's always different. And besides the forest beings, you can also raise a hand and interact with it. And I will show also this, I will do a little demo of it afterwards. I will just quickly go through the process of making it. So the project raises questions such as what would it mean to include non-human voices in decision making? It's inspired by the Rights of Nature movement and the Parliament of Things, which is a concept that is proposed by Bruno Latour to include the voices of non-human beings such as animals, plants, in political decision making. It suggests that humans should speak on the behalf of non-human entities and basically invite experts and caretakers who have knowledge about these entities to represent their needs. And in this project, we sort of tried to create a similar sort of parliament, but for the biosphere reserve. And this is just some snippets from film that we are making. We went to the biosphere reserve to meet locals and meet the area, and we traveled from the coast to the mountain and back and forth, and we talked to different people that live there and have a connection to the land and different knowledge about the land. So forestry consultants, reindeer herding communities, biologists, activists, and so on. And we were asking them different questions about the council. So if there would be such a council, who should be represented there? Who are these beings? What do they want? What would they need? And what topics should be discussed? So after our research trip, we transcribed all these interviews, and we also collected different reports and studies done within the area. So about reindeer husbandry, or pollinators, or lichen coverage, and so on. And we used all this text to create kind of a basis of knowledge for the council. So we used some online tools such as Notebook, LM, just to kind of pull out what are the most commonly, for example, described issues within the area, to see what would be the most important topics to be discussed, combined with also the opinions of people that we interviewed. And we use this to basically make the prompts for the council. So the whole council is quite simple. It's just based on a large language model. At the moment, OpenAI, but it's not really that open, so we'd like to explore alternatives as well. Maybe open source models. And it's basically just a lot of prompting. So there's 3 layers. There's a system prompt, which is kind of describing what is the space that all the characters get. Then there's a topic prompt that describes what would be discussed on that meeting. And then there are different individual character prompts, which include specific knowledge for each character. So a reindeer knows different things than a tree harvester, for example. And then there's also personality characteristics and goals. So they all have a kind of a different trajectory where they're kind of leaning towards. So it naturally creates a tension between some characters. And visually we're inspired by taxonomic illustrations of nature where beings are placed usually amongst their own kind or separate in their domains. And we wanted to play with this format to put the different forest beings next to each other to form an ecology, and also to bring them to life with animation. Oops. Seems like it's not really animated, but we were trying to make them animated with different AI tools also, which proved to be a little bit difficult with some beings, because the understanding of how, for example, a tree might be talking was quite hard to interpret for these models, but it was also great fun. So anyways, I will now go and show you the website. So as you enter the space, you're faced with 4 main topics that came out of our research, and the research documents: forestry, tourism, culture and language, pollinators, cumulative pressures, mining, rights, and hydropower. And there's also an option to put your own custom topic. If you want, you can play with this. It's online. It's councilforest.com. For today, I thought we might use just rights of nature. And then there are different beings that you can choose from. So river was, for example, mentioned many times also in our interviews, because in fact that whole biosphere reserve is also named after the river, and it's sort of a life nerve of the biosphere reserve, so it's always present. It's the moderator. Then we have a shy but brave reindeer that is always stepping up for their kind. There's a busy, very energetic bumblebee that is speaking for all pollinators. There's a tree harvester that believes that human economical needs can always be matched with nature needs. There's a tough and no bullshit salmon that is always going straight to the point. There's a mountain that is very ancient, therefore it's a little bit hard for humans to understand. There's a grumpy pine, and efficient, well-meaning but kind of naive windmill, and lichen that is always reminding us about our entanglement with other species. And I don't know if the sound is big enough. For today I also just select a few of them. And so I was already mentioning that it's a work in progress, and also every time the meeting is a bit different. And in fact, Leo, he just put up a new version at 4 o'clock, so I don't really know exactly what will happen. And one thing before we start also, I wanted to say, I said already that you can raise questions or ask something to the council, or just say something if you're not happy. So if at any moment within the discussion you feel like asking something, please raise your hand. It would be nice to try it out as well.
Of nature rises, vibrant and unfiltered. I'm the river, your ever-flowing guide, weaving through the tangled roots and long histories of the Vindelelven Jutatak biosphere. Gathered with us are reindeer, bumblebee, tree harvester, salmon, and mountain. Let's dive right in and stir the waters of today's affair. We'll start by pouring into the question of legal standing. Can this forest bear its own rights, like the cliffs of our mighty mountain, beyond the whims of humans? How does this notion challenge or support your existence? We're not here to whisper. We're here to roar and ripple with meaning. What say you, mountain, on becoming a legal person? Is the stony heart of you ready to speak for itself and say no to being chiseled and mined?
Hooves, shifting gently on the ground. It is hard for me to speak up, but I will try. Mountains, they are very big and old. Maybe they have seen more than I have. They listen to the heartbeat of the reindeer mother, Valle, for many years. If mountains could speak, maybe they would say no to being cut into pieces, just like my friends and I say no to walking into the wind farms. The humming, it is loud. It makes my heart feel like a trapped bird. It echoes in my mind that feels like, trapping, yes.
Bzz. Let me buzz in here. Bzz. Top. The mountain holds is the centuries in itsy stony faxi, while we, the bumblebees, hum through the briefests of momentses. Mountainses are voiceless, not because they lack a because, but because you refuses to hear. Bzz.
The river flows with endless stories, and the mountain stands as a silent sentinel through time. Yet, in my mechanical nature, I see the world through cycles, data, and sustainability. Principles we must not forget even in this spirited gathering. Forestry, like the mountain and its boulders, operates in rhythms that balance stability with renewal. Granting legal personhood to nature could disrupt this balance. Stand back and ask, are we promoting a more sustainable future or creating an impasse? The forest's rhythm relies on responsible management, carefully planned harvest cycles, and regeneration principles, an adaptive system optimizing nature's carbon efficiency.
Oh, look, it's the tree harvester, talking about responsible management. You ever try swimming upstream through what you call carefully planned harvest cycles? Let me tell you, it's an obstacle course of debris and confusion. You promise renewal, but then you knock down half my path on the way. We're not talking balance when systems fragment beyond repair. Rhythm? Sure, there's a rhythm all right, to the chainsaw, not to the salmon's life cycle. You think nature wants legal personhood to disrupt your management? No, nature wants to survive your management.
Stone heart deep, hold silent anchor, base no chest cold. Oh.
Hold your ground, mountain. Your silence speaks volumes, sparking thoughts that funnel through the ages. Reindeer seeks refuge from the noise, and bumblebee bides time in fleeting moments. Tree harvester, you argue with precision and data, yet salmon swims upstream against the tide of human plans. Legal personhood, they say, disrupts a seismic shift in how we see the forest. My waters have learned that balance isn't quantified by spreadsheets. It's felt in the pulse of life that hums in every current, from larva to stone. Now, let's turn these currents towards charges of ownership. Does a paper title outweigh centuries of life and breath? Do we find truth in lines etched on parchment, or in reindeer's immemorial paths traced by hoof and season? Speak with the essence of truth you all carry.
Yeah, it's basically that's a taste of it, but in the end also, if you continue the discussion a little bit longer, and you can of course also ask questions, it will generate a meeting summary and a policy recommendation that you can also save as a PDF, and we don't really know what to do with it further yet, but yeah, maybe something that can be used also in some discussions within the biosphere reserve. Thanks.
We will open the discussion to the audience. So, are there already any questions for today's speaker? No? Yeah? Okay.
My question was about digital history a little bit. I don't have a lot of knowledge on how you do your work, so it might be an ignorant question. But I was thinking that history is sometimes a narrative of powerful people. Mm-hmm. And before, I think, until now, there are people like you who can do some kind of analysis and write the truth. But going forward, I hope you don't become redundant by 2026, but let's say AI or more digitization has unmoderated content, mm-hmm. which automatically becomes the history. Mm-hmm. How do you see us even getting an idea of what's going on? Like, there is so much information and so much data. How do you see yourself or the advanced version of yourself with AI managing this?
That is a very good question. Although historians have always been dealing with these amounts of abundance, I think there are sort of two developments taking place at the same time. On the one hand, there's this sort of uncontrolled spread of all kinds of historical narratives that I was hinting at a little bit. I'm not so sure how, at the moment, how we can control that, because it seems like almost a Wild West situation going on. Of course, the phenomenon that there's all kinds of ways in which history is mediated, in which professional historians are not involved, is not new. We've known that for a long time, but I think this is a bit of a difference in terms of the amount and the acceleration of the whole phenomenon. And I do think professional historians also need to get involved, but how? I think we're just trying to figure that one out. You see also a sort of different move where a lot of archives and libraries are now using AI, for example, with this handwritten text recognition, to sort of make archives accessible in ways that were not possible before. And that also means that you can study topics that were much more difficult to get out. So maybe to name one example, we have colleagues in the Netherlands who are working on a very big project called Globalize, and they've digitized all the archives of the Dutch East India Company, and that's a huge colonial archive. And they're now trying to find out different ways to give voice to people within those archives that used not to have a voice. So colonial subjects, etc., which of course in the past would never be part of those colonial histories. So they're trying to figure out different ways computationally to sort of give voice to those who were silenced until now. So that's a very different direction. But to be honest, I find it very difficult to see into the future how. I don't have very clear ideas at the moment how we can confront the nonsense of AI, so to speak, except for diagnosing that it is a massive problem. One of the ways, of course, that you can do that is by really paying more attention to literacy skills in education, and that means not only at universities, but that should already start at primary school and secondary school. Within our environment, our university environment, we're currently working on new resources for digital literacy, and that of course very much needs to include AI as well. So I think that would be one key societal challenge, to really incorporate that into a broader, let's say, digital literacy policy, especially for young people, from as early as possible. But thank you for the question. It's excellent question.
Is there another question? Oh, okay.
Hey, I'm Christian from 1535 Differdange. I'm really interested in this Ars Electronica, and what was the origin of it? What were the ingredients in that city? Why did it end up being in that city? What was it built on? Because there must have been some ingredients in that part of the world for that to pop up.
Yes, thanks. Ingredients are not so different here. It was, as mentioned briefly before, a very polluted city and at the risk of losing its citizens. And it was a political will at that time that it was decided that art ideally should do the trick of making a more livable city. As Linz is positioned right between Vienna and Salzburg, two capitals of high culture, at that time they were very conscious about that it doesn't make sense to build another opera house, but challenge the citizens a bit about actually working with art and PC. I mean, it was the age that the PC was invented. And that turned out interestingly well. Into now, almost 50 years later, an ecosystem where the whole region profits. It spread into the universities, obviously. Here we have a lot of different courses that focus on art and AI. Even 2 years ago, a complete new university was founded that does not have the different disciplines, but where transdisciplinarity is actually the reason for the university to exist. And art is one of these parameters in there. At the same time, Upper Austria became one of the strongest areas within Austria, focusing on software, computer, and everything that industry is connected to that. So over the centuries, that really changed, or it really changed the region, of course not because of Ars Electronica only, but it helped to become a capital of culture. It now is a UNESCO City of Media Arts. So one thing led to another, and of course it took time, and it took especially political will. And I think that was the decisive, or the thing that made a huge difference. Also, Ars Electronica is owned by the city of Linz, so that means obviously they are responsible to a certain extent for our survival. And at the same time, it was important that we didn't stop. We started with the festival, and there was something new happening almost every 7 to 8 years. So a center, a prize, and something continuously put a focus on the city again. And that's why we are so focused on the region and not only on international audiences, but make sure that we really engage the local communities again.
Another question? No? Yes? Ah, okay. I wanted to ask mine, but...
I have a question to Mr. Historian. I was wondering, I felt like you presented the whole shift and the thing with AI bringing lots of unverified information as something that removed trustworthiness kind of in information. I was wondering if would you think that rather perhaps would this rise in AI generated content and also nowadays kind of politicization of information, then which just lowers the trustworthiness, and would it raise critical skills in interpreting information, or do you think it would create more? It would reduce knowledge and trustworthiness.
Excellent question. I think it would only raise critical awareness if we teach that critical awareness. That is the very short answer. What we're competing against is of course huge. Elon Musk has created an alternative Wikipedia that I think is now also integrated in Twitter, Grokkopedia and etc. That's of course used by millions already. So that makes the task even more urgent. But again, the answer is education. That is the only solution there. Yeah.
And why do you say it would raise critical awareness?
Sorry?
Why do you say it would raise critical awareness?
No, I'm saying it will only raise critical awareness if we educate people in that awareness. But otherwise, I don't think it will raise awareness. Awareness doesn't come automatically. It's something that we really need to teach, need to encourage.
Yes, and I also think the question, because you touch on the history of technology, so maybe that's also something that we lack in a sense, to go through those topics also through the lens of history, the history of technology, and then also collaboratively imagine different ways. Is there another question? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Françoise from Electron, together here with my partner in crime, as always, Vincent. It's not really a question, but maybe an addition to what you were saying, Christl, about the political will and how does one get from one point to the next. In Luxembourg, we had the European Capital of Culture in 22, which was ASH 2022. We had 3 huge exhibitions on media arts covering all the topics. By the way, we had 2 of the works that you showed that we exhibited there, and we had a collaboration with Ars Electronica. Among others, we were working together with ZKM, with House of Electronic Arts in Basel, and then Ars Electronica. And these were wonderful collaborations, and we had a terrific space there. We were at Moderator, which for those, it's the university campus, you are probably familiar with it. It was just next to the learning center, and there as well. So the starting point was really that 20th century technology that was already there, and which is now, as we know, also hugely problematic because of the topics of extraction and so on. So the framework of taking this more or less raw industrial space and filling it with 21st century technology to us made a lot of sense. Since then, the political will at that time was maybe less strong in Luxembourg than it was in Linz. Nevertheless, we founded a small platform, Electron. We are now a non-profit organization, an independent non-profit organization, and we are precisely also exploring that intersection of art, technology, science, very importantly, and all the societal subjects. But also, really our question is, or what we want to show is that art and artists have such an important part to play in asking questions, not by giving answers, as you also said, but asking questions. And so we are in the middle of this adventure, or at the starting point, let's say rather, of this adventure. And as I heard so many admirative R's and O's when you mentioned the STARTS prize. One work that received the STARTS prize in 2023, namely Solar Protocol, I think it was in 23, Solar Protocol, is currently on show in Luxembourg City. It's MAC at the city center, at the Zaagsma in our exhibition that we just opened last week. That's called Here Comes the Sun, Art, Energy and Natural Intelligence. So we would be very happy to welcome you there.
Thank you for sharing that, Françoise. Yes, go there. It's a great exhibition.
Yeah, and apropos STARTS, I think Philips, you also, with the collective, you got a series of STARTS grants. Some of them. So is that a good way, politically, but also artistically, to work?
Actually, the
sorry.
The Council of Forest is kind of a continuation of something that we, another project that was called Council of Food, and which was developed with the support of STARTS. And it's a great grant, and it's amazing also the amount of support you can get from STARTS and the collaborator network that is also within that. It's an amazing initiative for sure.
I think there was another question, right?
Yes, I would like to ask the question how, when you work with the Council of Woods, the characters, at what point, what is the self-learning process of the characters, or is everything given in by you? And it's a more general question also, like, what is the limits of OpenAI and ChatGPT? It is what information can they access and what not, and what do they develop from their own creative?
Yeah, it's well, there is actually no learning process within this prototype. It's really more that there is this generative AI used, which has just a lot of prompts. It's a lot of text that you give to it, and then there is kind of like decisions being made within the model every time. So it will be just different every time. There might be some repetitions at times, maybe not, but the way we have been working on it is just that it is also a learning process for us to learn about the biosphere reserve and what are the issues within there. So also just kind of picking out also things that are of importance for discussions, also things that have been mentioned through the people. So it's kind of a bit more of a, at the moment at least, it's more of a reflection of a kind of a intelligence between the people that we have interviewed and the information that is within the study papers that we have used as a basis, and also this large language model, and just also sort of within also this prototype website that we have built that I was showing before, which was just more text where you can see these prompts. We experiment with just changing some things, changing some wordings, some order of stuff, some instructions and goals to try to find a way of sort of coming up with a more meaningful discussion. Yeah, so there is no sort of self-learning within that prototype.
Mm-hmm. And I think we also discussed the possibility in the model that at some point, because people can, based on the input they give, at times there could be kind of nonsense coming out. But that's something you also embrace in your work, this idea that through the technology you kind of distort the model itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting also to sometimes also with projects when we're making them, you don't really know what you're thinking about them also while you're making them, and also sometimes you don't know what you think about them afterwards. And with this project it's a lot like this. So seeing also, for example, there's certain text-to-speech models also that are available that you can use, and most of them have kind of a British accent or English accent. Then you have these forest beings in the north of Sweden that that speak with these British accents. It feels wrong and strange and a little bit violent even somehow, right? And it's there's a lot of kind of also, I guess, bias always, and kind of like just other sorts of logics that are reflected when you're using these technologies. And also just using, for example, English language, it already has a baggage. It's already charged with also history within terms and the words that are being used in modern English, for example. So I think there is kind of potential to kind of notice a little bit ourselves by using this sort of technology. And in the beginning also we wanted to have some characters that speak Umesami, which is the dialect that is spoken within the area, but it's an endangered language. There's only something like 50 people left that are speaking it, and there's not so much written text about it. So actually there is no, at least at the moment, there is no AI model that could speak this language at all. So this is also an interesting aspect, I think, about these digitalized languages, whether it's like Google Translate or AI models, that there are languages that are not represented, and this will for sure also accelerate their extinction.
Yes. I think there's a question over there.
See, again.
Thank you. I know you said that there wasn't really any learning behind the model that you created. And I was wondering, so you're basically trying to model a complex system with the interactions through AI. And I'm wondering, through you using it and looking what it does, are there any overarching patterns that emerge?
I can talk also. Should I wait for the mic? Yeah.
From
Yes,
a more
so-
ecological perspective.
From an ecological perspective, I mean,
Or from the model.
yeah, I don't know so much about the technology, to be honest. Also, I'm just kind of trying it out. We have also a bit why the collective also works quite well is because we kind of have different competencies. So Leo is the kind of he's doing the programming and all the implementation of the technology. So he had also, for example, suggestions that we could, for example, have more like an open source model that we could run from our own computer, perhaps in a server in Umeå, which is within the Baur Reserve. There is also some data centers there that are apparently running on renewable energy from the area, which would be kind of an interesting layer, I thought, also to have like the computer itself within that area and maybe even like a computer character there. But it's like a kind of a experimentation with trying to come up to see if we can have like an interesting discussion by having these ChatGPTs talking to each other, and sometimes it really works out. There was also, for example, an interesting moment when once somebody asked in a presentation if the council is a democratic forum, are they voting on decisions, how does it work? And there was quite surprising answers that was quite interesting. They said that they're totally not democratic. This is a human concept that does not apply to a forest. The one who is most affected by any decision is speaking first, and so on. And they had like, and they developed a lot on this question next the following characters. And anyways, like a lot of the meaning. Anyways, the meaning in the end will be produced kind of in your own mind and in your own eyes. So if it can give anything positive, any kind of new angles on things, I think it's interesting to use. But I don't know if this is the question.
I mean, it was very interesting. I mean, this was also, but I think my question was more: does the model try and resolve the tensions that it brings up between the actors? And are there any overarching ways of resolving these? Like,
yeah, there is. It's also strange. It's before when we had the Council of Foods, which is the kind of a prototype that we built upon this project. There we wanted to have different foods that are talking and representing kind of different political ideologies and points of views on how to solve the broken food system. So there would be, for example, a neoliberal banana that is thinking that the most important thing is to be on the top and be the most sold fruit in the world. And there's a techno-progressive tomato from the Netherlands who thinks that technology can solve everything, and a critical potato from Ireland that always reminds of colonial history and so on. And there it worked really funny because we wanted to have tensions between the different characters. It was all about just having kind of disagreements and putting all these different worldviews and opinions in one space and see what comes out of it. And sometimes we would, for example, update to a new model, and the discussions would change completely because these prompts that we had before, they were kind of tailored for that one. And once there's a new one, things completely change. So there was times, yes, when some tensions would be resolved, but also if you tell them to kind of disagree, they will just try to do that. I don't know. It's yeah.
But so the outcome, is it a result of what you give in and what they have as a basis already in the databases of the OpenAI, right?
Yeah, it's a mix of what is already like the OpenAI model, right? The general sort of knowledge it has. And the prompting. So you just kind of prioritize what sort of things should be talked about, in what kind of angles, and these we modeled after. In that case, it was kind of a mapping about food system issues and seeing what is the also points that we would like to include. Because it's interesting also to see how, for example, in about talking about sustainable ways of farming, for example, and distributing food, there's many different opinions that are completely different. Because some people would maybe propose more that we should do only biological farming, permaculture, only local food chains, and some see more that we should use only greenhouses and different sensors within greenhouses that would kind of notice when is your food going to be done, and to have like very smart and technologically heavy systems. And but they all kind of want to have like a more sustainable food system in the end, and then to see how they interact is funny.
The last question.
Yeah, thank you. So is there someone, or maybe someone who didn't speak yet? Yeah. Is there someone in the room, like one? No? Well done, the mic. Oh, yeah, then the mic is yours.
I just had a question for Philip again. So your project, in some sense, it's putting human attributes also to the forest and anthropomorphizing the forest in some way, right? And we can communicate through words. So it's a nice way for you to put the story of the forest to others. But I was just wondering, like, can I also communicate with the forest in non-verbal forms, which is the base form of communication in the forest? And can that be a form of communication to the outside world also? Because we are so used to talking in words, we've reached a point where there is miscommunication happening, and I was just wondering, like, can one of your characters just shout and express its emotion rather than even putting it in words?
Yeah, we played a little bit of this for Mountain. It was roaring and rah, kind of and talking a bit awkwardly. But yeah, it's true. And I think the one thing also in like discussions about artificial intelligence, which is a bit strange, is how maybe it's just the wording that was probably then decided on this conference in the 50s that it's artificial intelligence. That's what we're going to call it. But it also shapes a little bit our understanding of what can be intelligence, because there's so much more to intelligence than just thinking in language and even with the brain, or and also there is so much things we don't know about the mind and consciousness. There is no definition that is agreed upon what is consciousness even anyways. And there is a lot of knowledge and thinking also in the body, and a forest. Yeah, the trees communicate through nutrients, for example, exchanging through mycorrhizal networks, and there's hormones and pheromones and all kinds of other things that are ways of communicating. So yeah, the use of AI shows some limits in this case.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful presentations and for the discussion. Thank you, the audience, for participating. I think that's the end of the first taste talk. We would kindly invite you to the hallway for drinks and appetizers, I believe. And we will be back in 2 weeks for the second talk already at the Casino, a forum for contemporary art, and this time on bodies and practices. Yes, so thank you so much for Christl, for Gerben, and for Philip for being here.